There's a lot of things that we can take from it, but we've learned a lot, and there was some dark days early. It was pretty quiet.
I was afraid that the kids would not know how to act in school once things happen. I was afraid the kids really wouldn't learn anything and that they wouldn't be online.
We could actually make something wonderful, but we have too many people that are stubborn about how this is how it used to be, this is how it's always been, so why do we need to change it? The kids need to adapt for us. No, at this point I think we need to adapt for the teachers and the students.
That part of it was very, how much I lost as a teacher was surprising. Because I feel like I lost a lot as well.
And I felt like the struggle last year was getting kids to want to do stuff. Kids used to want to be involved in stuff. They wanted to go do the extra thing.
I do think that we learn, the majority of students do learn better in person. I do think we also learn that there is a small amount of students who do actually learn better online. I feel we have a mental health crisis in this country.
Because when you're at school, your teachers are helping you stay organized. You go to this class. When you're at home on your iPad and you've got distractions at home, dogs, other babies, other kids trying to learn, parents that are not home, parents that are home, there's too many distractions at home, and that's where I think a lot of kids got lost.
I also had a kid that always complained if I sat outside that the birds were too loud, which always made me laugh because I was like, this is something we should be happy to hear about right now, like the birds, it's an uplifting, positive thing.
So like I said before, I was more than ready to get back into a classroom and because there's a rejuvenated purpose, you know what I'm saying? It felt like I had purpose again.
The pandemic forced many facets of our education system to work on overdrive, which exhausted resources, teachers, and students. Many of these breaking points in one way or another have gone unaddressed. The safe words were a new normal, which meant profound changes to the way education, at least public education, was practiced. What happened during these changes? How are educators and students reacting to these unprecedented changes? And now, 3 years later, what are the effects of lockdowns when we return to normal? Over 4 million teachers are in the public education system in America and act as behavior managers, society builders, community leaders, and the individuals who taught you how to speak, write, and function in the world around you. Let's hear from them.
Sure. I believe it was March 13th of 2020, and my wife actually was Deputy Director of Department of Public Health at the time, so she had been working with the pandemic for about 2 months, so I was kind of in the weeds myself with it. When it came down, it was a Friday afternoon, and they said, no kids for, I believe it was 5 days, was a week that they were to stay home. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be interesting, with how we're going to, work through that with internet and things like that. So there was a lot of obstacles, but we got through that initially with our IT department and hotspots we had. So I probably did about 500 deliveries throughout that first year myself with iPads and hotspots going from house to house to try and gear up our kids with the IT so that they could work online at home.
They expected us to be able to just figure this out overnight with no training. And I know that our district and nowhere had any training for how to do this, but it was incredibly daunting. I'm really grateful that I had a really strong inner circle of teachers that we all collaborated and worked together to make this work. We had a lot of Zoom meetings and Google Meets meetings about how to make specifically band and instrumental classes work, let alone our regular classes too. It was mostly just overwhelmingness of like, how am I gonna do this? They're sitting at home. It was almost as if you were talking about something you're a master at to a brick wall. And what is the point? What is that getting anybody? And also just being expected to do that from your homes, making sure you had a home environment that was good enough to be able to teach in. I mean, my home life and my professional life, I have a very good idea of the difference of the two of them and having them really mesh together.
I was not sure what I was going to do because you can't rehearse a band or an orchestra on Zoom. My music theory class was fine. I just had to digitize what I was doing, which was pretty easy because I already had all the worksheets, so I just scanned them in and taught the kids how to mark up worksheets. But for the performance-based classes, I had to reinvent everything I was doing because we couldn't do a band rehearsal on Zoom. We did do early on some of those, you'd see like virtual bands and orchestras where each kid is in their own box. And that was a lot of work on my end for editing. So I knew that wasn't gonna be realistic being online for a whole, what we thought was a quarter and ended up being 3/4 of the year. So I was having to come up with new projects, new ways to keep them engaged and hopefully keep them playing without being able to practice together.
I would have tried to make sure that we had time to adjust before we were just kind of thrown into doing this at home, because it was a big adjustment for us as staff because we had to learn new software we hadn't used before. We had to learn how to use it. We had to learn how to tell when the kids are playing games with you if something's really wrong or if they're just like not doing it, if they're really there or not. We had a big learning curve that we had to quickly overcome in order to teach online with the students. So I would have suggested we give the kids a couple weeks off as train and then bring them online.
I was very nervous about it, sad, and honestly scared for my students. I felt like that it was a knee-jerk reaction, and because they didn't really know what was going on. I just don't think that it was very well thought through because they didn't think about what would happen to the students in that aspect. So it was not something I wanted to happen.
My reaction to COVID itself was, this is gonna pass like everything else. I didn't think it was gonna become and, mushroom into this big thing that it did, It just, I think like me, like everyone else, that when it finally they did close down the school, I was caught off guard, kind of surprised. I thought it was like a rush, I didn't think there was a plan. So I think closing the schools, I thought it would be temporary, and I thought we'd be back in school in a couple of weeks. I never knew it'd be an entire year.
And we have students who have lots of anxiety about being at school around a lot of people, and a lot of those students I did see succeed online. They would be there every single day, they would be engaged, and they really enjoyed being in the comforts of their own home. But again, I do believe the majority of students did need to be in school.
Yes, very much so on a daily basis, because I'm seeing the results in the behavior and in their academic lives. It's not, we are still struggling to get back to normal, and our kids don't know what normal is.
As lockdown restrictions are lifted, people are discovering what a post-pandemic world could possibly look like. Let's now get you a roundup of what this new normal looks like in countries that are lifting their lockdowns.
A real recovery will require not just intensive academic interventions, but also intentional efforts to rebuild students' social skills and their sense of belonging in their school communities. That remains the central paradox facing teachers today. Despite all the attention being paid to lost learning, schools won't actually be able to get kids back on track academically without doing more to address the pandemic's deeper social and emotional impacts. On average, learning deficits emerged early in the pandemic and have neither closed nor widened substantially. The average U.S. public school student in grades 3 through 8 lost the equivalent of half of a year of learning in math and a quarter of a year in reading. The evidence shows that schools do not naturally bounce back. Affected students recovered 20 to 30% of the lost ground in the first year, but then made no further recovery in the subsequent 3 to 4 years. Considering how these findings affect students' ability to perform in the real world, it has devastating outcomes for huge blocks of young adults who may feel even more isolated in society in an already increasing remote work life.
The students surprised me. Some students just in both directions. Some students, they were on there every day. They were doing all the assignments, all the lessons. And then there were some students that I never saw. So my next thought was, what's going to happen with these students? And actually that first start of COVID, when it first came out, we were also told at that time that we could not give any Fs. So when we did grade books, I couldn't, if a kid never even showed up, or if a kid showed up and never did their homework, I could not give them zeros. So nobody could flunk that.
These kids are still not used to being in a classroom. That was one of the biggest things was, you have a fifth grader who was home for COVID. Then they pass their classes, they go to sixth grade. They come back partially into the year, and suddenly we expect them to remember, quieter in the hallways, just talking in a normal voice, sit down in the classroom, no running around, no horseplay. They had to be retaught everything. So emotionally and mentally in a classroom, they're like a grade level behind of where they are and what we're instructing and what our expectations are. That was a big factor for me because I had to keep saying, okay, they're really a fifth grader. I can't expect them to act like the seventh grader. Last time they were in a classroom, they were in fifth grade, and now we're in seventh grade.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of behavior problems, at least here in this building, and I think there's a direct correlation to the lack of socialization our kids had. And I think that the missing years definitely has had an influence on how kids act, accountability from parents, and just knowing how to act at school. I think we're missing a lot of those pieces, more so than I've ever experienced in my 14 years teaching.
I think some of the other lasting effects were the being alone. A lot of these kids were alone in their homes for a very long period of time, and they don't know how to interact with each other in a healthy manner. I saw a lot of behaviors in the last 2 years I'd never seen before, and they were unstoppable. No matter how many times you talked to the student, you talked to the student talked to the admin about it, you called home about it, they came back the next day and they did it because they had such unhealthy social skills. And I think that we're gonna see that this generation of, I guess, the COVID kids, they're going to always have issues, especially in the real world outside of school, because they're behind. They're all behind by 2 to 3 years, and we're not doing anything to fix it. We're just putting Band-Aids, and eventually the entire system is going to collapse because of it.
In brief, many districts had a high rate of confusion and misdirected approaches, resulting in a beleaguered staff, causing mixed outcomes. This regretfully paints a picture of an unwillingness or desire for the teaching profession as a whole. Perhaps even a moral judgment of disdain from state and local administrators about what teachers' work actually is day to day. The profession already requires educators to constantly be reevaluating their training, following strict guidelines laid out by districts, meetings that will eat up prep periods, hours spent outside of their salaried pay helping with in-school projects, or grading and various paperwork that usually has to be taken home in order to meet the goals of the next day. Increasing teacher compensation is critical to effectively recruiting and retaining the teachers that schools need.
let's just hire whoever, instead of how do we fix that at the college level? How do we fix that at the high school level to get them into? So, I mean, that's the other thing is I feel like the teachers are forgotten in all this because of all the work they put into it and the frustrations they had. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed, and it has not.
And I feel as though in the last 3 years from the pandemic on, teachers have been getting the short end of the stick. Teachers are being blamed for everything.
See, what I thought was, I was like, okay, coming out of this, they're gonna realize how much they need us, you know? And it's almost like, no, it's like we're the bad guys, you know? I was like, and I said that the other day, I was like, when did education become like this, you know, doormat? And when did us as educators become the bad guys, you know? We've always had the best interests of our students in mind. You learn that's 101 education, you know? Every decision is made for the betterment of your students. But yet, the people we need to support us also see us as the enemy. So I think, you know, we're still recovering. I think there were some great things that were done in a bind.
Here is the connection between wages and student outcomes, which even anecdotally lead to depressed outcomes in students' ability to function and learn. For the last 30 years, average pay for teachers has decreased as adjusted for inflation. The nation's report card has shown modest increases or fairly flat outcomes in students' performances based on the data for each subject. Based on a study done in 2022 by Emma Garcia and Eunice S. Hahn, in which the data reveals positive associations between higher teacher salaries and student outcomes across the board. In brief, the discussion lays out: districts that provide higher teacher compensation are better able to attract high-quality teachers and retain them in schools. Moreover, teachers' morale and enthusiasm are more likely to be higher when they are paid more. Echoing the benefits of higher teacher pay, advocates for the pay-for-performance system urge an increase in the compensation of teachers based on their productivity, measured by educational outcomes of their students. However, our study finds that universal and unconditional increase in teacher base salary, regardless of student performance or any supplementary compensation tied with educational outcomes, is associated with the improved district's academic performance.
There is a shortage, and I always say the shortage is a symptom of a respect issue for the profession. So we're working really hard to make sure we're recruiting, retaining, making sure we're pushing to get teachers to a competitive salary. Right now, teachers get paid 24% less than people with similar degrees. But we're moving.
Are federal politicians unwilling to weigh in on worsening statistics across the board when it comes to the state of public education? Sweeping policy changes have taken place over the last few decades when problems boil up to the surface. In 1983, A Nation at Risk was released, a report on the state of education from the Secretary of Education, T.H. Bell. He had created the National Commission on Excellence in Education to expand to the national stage the overall concern from the public, perception that something is seriously remiss in our educational system. The nation was threatened by a rising tide of mediocrity. Fast forward 40 years later, and similar risks and assessments can be made about the state of education since the lockdowns.
So I wasn't always as focused as I should have been on school, and I did some things that I'm not proud of, and I got in more trouble than I should have. And my life could have easily taken a turn for the worse.
It is rather surprising that the data has not sounded many alarm bells yet in Congress. Just a quick glance at a few articles can show the need for a conversation on the national stage. The last sweeping change to public education came back in 2015 with the Every Student Succeeds Act, enacting, among other reforms, that for the first time all students in America be taught to high academic standards that will prepare them to succeed in college and careers. So far, with the nation's overall education performance slipping, and the inability for more and more teenagers to attend college due to rising costs, it gives younger students the disillusionment about learning or trying to achieve an active role in society or their community. These trends need to be reversed as they seem to have a snowball effect on a public already squeezed and stressed by the lasting impressions of the pandemic. I feel it is necessary for a conduit to be put in place for teachers' concerns to be addressed. Perhaps a survey of questions could be created. Then the problems could be addressed directly from the classroom. Policies could shift to focus more on the abilities of the teachers to control the outcomes in their classrooms as they see fit. The duties of administration can fall less on the teacher and go back to the administrators. One of the other outcomes could be the use of technology to benefit, aid, and redesign the way teaching can be performed. Interactive technologies aid students in achieving higher outcomes through rigorous or complex strategy modules, making learning more fun and entertaining, where practical practices of the past might seem to dull and lose students who function well with technology. The 2024 NETP is a forward-thinking approach to reframing and realizing the potential of educational technology to enhance the instructional core, reduce achievement gaps, and improve student learning in our schools.
You know, we're turning the corner here. I mean, there's obviously some lasting effects of COVID, but I feel like just moving forward, you know, we're going to learn from some of the mistakes that we have done. And I think the technology piece is the biggest thing because the kids, you know, they had to try and embrace that. And obviously the adults had to really try and learn and embrace that for students to learn in that setting.
I feel like when we talk about education reform, that we need to have more options for our students to learn. However students learn best. We're all different. If there is somebody who can stay at home and learn online and be there every day and engaged, I feel like that could be an option for them moving along in education reform.
But ultimately, kids need to be in school and they need to be in classrooms, and we need to utilize technology in classrooms, but there's no way that that technology is going to replace a teacher. I don't, in my opinion, and I feel very strongly about that. We're very much necessary.
Since this is an election year, instead of the rhetoric we normally hear on culture wars and this party against that party, presumptive nominees could focus the conversation on these shortcomings in public education to homogenize potential electors. They could look for a common understanding of the issues laid out above and how they will act in order to promote public education in communities that are facing harsher challenges. National Education Week, celebrated November 13th through the 17th, could be when education takes a national stage with publicized talks, lectures, and meetings between policymakers, teachers and educators, and community shareholders to get the public energized about their role in school. Media can play a central role in advertising this convention of sorts to the masses. All things considered, these observations and approaches have many benefits for the coming academic school years. Educators can take bold steps in order to get schooling back on track. The weight of progress remains on the shoulders of the teachers and staff to progress the students into a better normal future and to inform the public of the need for dialogue at the national level. In the meantime, the nation will do well to afford educators the worth they deserve, especially if there could be the potential for disaster in the future.